Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Robert Marks, a retired professor of the University of Miami School of Medicine. This is a YouTube presentation on climate change, the hoax of CO2. This will be a preamble to what you're going to view over approximately 10 different segments. This is based on Climate Change, a Hoax of CO2 Revealed, my latest book on how climate change really occurs and that CO2 has really nothing to do with climate change. The book will tell you that climate change is real. It's advancing slowly at the rate of 1 degree Fahrenheit per century, different from what your politicians are telling you, and that the sea level rise is not due to melting of glaciers. Now, that may be in confrontation with what you're hearing, but stick with this, and I think you will find some interesting data. Now, this is how you can order my book. I would please if you would. And then as we start this, I will show you that there is my uh, email address and my phone number, as well as the publisher. We're open for questions and challenges. So this is all really transparent, things that politicians talk about, but very rarely do. Okay, what I want to begin with that you will learn in the upcoming 10 segments are the 20 questions the climate change obsessed cannot answer. So if you're challenged by somebody who's really dedicated to climate change and has uh, bought in all of the nonsense that's been put out there, ask them any one of these 20 questions. Let's start with the first one. What did CO2 contribute to the ending of the last ice age and the melting of its glacier? A 1.5-mile thick glacier extending down to the Illinois-Wisconsin border melted by the year 12,000 AD, and there was certainly no CO2 produced by our cavemen ancestors. So what did CO2 have to do with that? Also, follow up with the question, what did CO2 contribute to the ending of the 4 previous ice ages, including the most severe one called global snowball Earth, which essentially is one that uh, encompassed 90% of the entire Earth. Only the equator spared a glacier. Okay, number 3. Why was Al Gore's prediction of no ice left in the Arctic by 2015 so wrong? He's the one who started the wrong science with this because he had no background in chemistry and physics. And what we see now, 9+ years later, that there's plenty of ice left in the Arctic. It's 7 feet thick. It has not changed since the mid 1980s. And so Al Gore was way off base on this. Now, he was a co-conspirator. That's James Hansen. He's a NASA computer scientist, and he ran everything through computers. And the models predicted there'd be no ice left in the Arctic by 2017. Well, that's 7 to 8 years ago. And as I just said, there's plenty of ice left in the Arctic. Polar bears are not dying. In fact, polar bears have an increased population since that time. So, what was wrong here? Classic computer science goof up. Garbage in, garbage out. He failed to consider the science behind global change. Okay, another one. If reducing CO2 is the answer to global warming, there's been a noted 13% global reduction in the human CO2 production. So therefore, why is CO2 still slowly rising and the planet still warming, although at a very slow rate? So apparently, all of our solar and wind and EV cars have not reduced CO2 rise. Ask your challenging questionnaire that. Okay, what is the real cause of dead bleach coral? Now, I live in the Miami, Florida area, and there's always a lot of discussion. Well, coral is dying off. It must be due to warmer water. Nonsense. It's a biologic reason that I'll get into in one of the segments. I would invite you to really look at that clearly, and I think it will make very good sense to you. This has been researched very thoroughly. Okay, why was the author of the so-called hockey stick graph forced to publish a retraction in the Nature Journal, which is a prestigious medical journal? This person here published what's called the hockey stick graph, which showed a dramatic increase in temperature and CO2 rise linked together. But when scientists look at the data, they found it was completely fudged, and they made him write a retraction in the Journal of Nature. Yet this has become the major focal point of the Paris Accords that our politicians talk about. They have not read the retraction, apparently, because they still use that bogus data to support their ideology of climate change. It is completely false. Okay, why did the author of the children's book, The Down to Earth Guide to Global Warming, reverses data to falsely support global warming? Now, this author was the film producer of The Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore. He too was caught changing the data. He had it actually reversed. Had he presented correct data, it would have shown that CO2 has nothing to do with temperature rise on Earth. Yet he fudged the data and was caught doing it. Now, because a book is not a refereed scientific journal, he did not have to write a retraction. In interviews, he just blew it off. Well, it was just a simple oversight and a mistake. It was a big mistake. Okay, why did NOAA misrepresent the degree of the distance between the minimal and maximal elliptical paths of the Earth's orbit around the sun? One of my segments will show you how they falsely reported this. So NOAA, a so-called respected governmental agency, was trying to convince you of something that is wrong. So why did NOAA do that? They're funded by the government is the more simple answer. Okay, another question. Why global warming reduction was gained? By the $500 million given to the UN by the Obama administration and the $1 billion given to the UN by the Biden administration for so-called climate change reparation. You probably weren't aware of this, but yes, this has happened. And if you go to the conference of the parties that the UN puts on every year about global warming, what you see is a group of third world countries, Nigeria, Indonesia, Venezuela, a bunch of them, with their hands out trying to get reparations for global warming. And that what happens is Somalia, Ethiopia, and all these that are given this big pot of money basically corruptly waste it. That's your tax money, by the way. Okay, and two, another question that you must ask these climate change obsessed: why does NOAA measure the temperature readings next to heat exhaust fans? They were caught at this by Epoch Times reporters. And why are they recording temperature readings on hot sidewalks and near buildings that have been out in the sun? Again, NOAA is funded by the government. They're trying to show you that the government is right in taxing you and forcing mandates on this. Okay, another one. Why does NOAA measure CO2 on top of the Mauna Loa volcano in Hawaii? Sorry, I had trouble pronouncing that. But this is a volcano spewing out CO2. That's where they're measuring CO2. Of course, it's going to show higher CO2 levels. I'm not making this up. This is exactly what's going on and how absolutely treacherous it is. Okay, another question. If the climate change obsessed believe CO2 is a driving force for global warming, why is there no governmental support for reforestation, the reseeding of coral, and the kelp farming? All of these three entities are known to take CO2 out of the environment. But take a step back and look, what are they doing? They're basically trying to get you and I to produce less CO2 by EV mandates, by telling us we can't use different burners and charcoal and whatever. So they're not trying to reduce CO2 at all. They're just trying to have you and I pay for it. So how does the climate change obsessed explain the remains of a Viking farming village about 12,000 AD under the current Greenland glacier? So the Vikings weren't building villages under ice. They were building them at the time that there was no ice there. So this tells us that there were warming periods far greater than ours currently, and that we have had an ice over since then. So global warming is part of a natural cycle. So how does a carbon tax or purchasing carbon credits really reduce atmospheric CO2? This underscores what I just said, that the interest of our government is not to really reduce CO2, or else they'd be supporting coral reseeding, kelp farming, reforestation. What they just want to do is tax us. you pay for CO2, you don't reduce it. Now, the other one I think you'll find is somewhat humorous when you get to this segment. If methane from cows drives global warming, why is the current Biden-Harris administration not supporting red algae diet supplements, which are known to reduce animal methane production by 60 to 80%? Once again, they're not interested in reducing CO2. They're not interested in reducing methane. They're just complaining about it so that they can tell you that you can't eat beef and that your kids can't drink milk, and they can tax farmers per cow. That is almost criminal. Okay, so is methane from any source really a problem if you look at it? And I discussed this in the upcoming segment on cow methane, when it represents only 0.00017% of the atmosphere. CO2 represents 0.412. Oxygen is 220.1. So you can see that this is a trace element in the atmosphere and should not really be a concern. It's only a dodge to attack the farming and dairy industries and make them pay. And so even at that, ask them the question, what happens to the very flammable methane in the atmosphere during one of the 1.4 billion lightning strikes that occurs globally each year? If methane is a problem, it gets burned up during every lightning storm. So that's why it's there in only 0.0001%. And then getting toward the end of this, why do the 1,609 scientists who became so agitated about the non-science of behind global warming that they developed the non-intergovernmental panel on climate change called the NIPCC? And they reviewed the data, and that every notion that fossil fuels and CO2 are the cause of global warming, they refute. I'm one of them. How do the climate change obsessed explain the fact that core and deep soil core samples indicate that the CO2 concentration several times in the past, particularly around the time of Christ and particularly around the area of the Roman Empire, has been more than 10 times that of the present? They can't explain that. There's been warmer periods on Earth than we are currently having right now. And those certainly had nothing to do with CO2. So I want you to review some of these questions. They will become more obvious as you go through each particular segment. I invite you to look at that with an open mind, with a scientific idea in mind, and the fact that this is the real truth. These are all facts, and I've gathered these for you and hopefully set the stage for the rest of this program.